Got my Uba. Got my mate.
Okay.
Ready rock. Oh, I never shake them.
You're supposed to shake them.
I know. I never have
because
ever.
the stuff settles. You can always swirl it now.
Yeah, I mean, I could have put my paw.
Like sometimes if I've been drinking one and I have it sitting there for a while, I'll pick it up and I give it just kind of a little swirl.
I could
on
put.
the batter.
What if I put my palm on the top and then
Get a wet palm.
yerba mate palm. Palma mate.
And if I do this, will you get water everywhere? Yeah. That's like that story I told about. I don't know if I've ever told it on any of my podcasts about my sister Jessie and the Yoo-hoo incident.
No.
Did I tell you about that?
Why don't you tell me now?
Okay. So one time we were driving about 4 or 5 hours to go visit my mom and brother in Clear Lake. And my sister was driving. So she would have been like 18 at the time. So I'm like 14, 15.
Okay.
And we were just getting stoned, driving. I was stoned and she was driving.
Right. Yeah, of course.
Statute of limitations. This was a long time ago. It was like 20 plus years ago.
Yeah.
So we're driving along, and for some reason we're just like making stupid movie quotes. And the movie Big Daddy with Adam Sandler came up.
Oh, the classic Big Daddy.
Yeah.
All I remember is that the kid wants to pee, and the restaurant won't let him, so they pee on the side of the wall. Because that's like the poster.
This is the part where he's trying to like check out the kids that the kid's hanging out with because he wants to know if they're bad influences. So he's talking about like trying to see if they'll admit to like using drugs or drinking. They're like fucking 5-year-olds. And at one point, they're drinking Yoo-hoo. He talks about Yoo-hoo and he goes like, "Oh, I love Yoo-hoo, and Yoo-hoo loves you." And so like that line came up, and then Jesse's like, What is that even about? I'm like, Yoo-hoo, Yoo-hoo? And she's like, no, like, you don't know Yoo-hoo? It's a drink. It's a chocolate drink, Yoo-hoo.
Oh, okay.
Right? And so I'm like, that's it. Pull over right now. We're going to get some Yoo-hoo. And so we stop at the next gas station, which happened to be in Rohnert Park, California. Shout out to anybody in Rohnert Park or the Santa Rosa area, if you're listening. And we pulled in on Golf Course Drive. I guarantee you there's at least maybe one person's like, hey, cool, that's down the street from my local Arby's. And we pulled in and got the Yoo-hoos. And this is at nighttime, by the way, so it's dark.
Yeah.
And we get back on the road, and we've been on the road for about 5-10 minutes, and I'm drinking my drink happily. And as I ask her, like, hey, so how's the Yoo-hoo? And she goes, well, it's like, I don't know why it's so great. It's kind of watery. And I say, oh, well, you're supposed to shake it. And she says, oh, okay. And then immediately the inside of the front of this minivan is entirely soaked in chocolate drink.
Just like Pulp Fiction, just like...
Yeah, because she didn't put the lid back on to shake it. And so, but I always remember it as this like 1-2 punch of like, me, it's in the darkness, immediately just being soaked. And then hearing her from the driver's seat just go, like the most disappointed and sad noise ever.
She lost all of her Yoo-hoo all over the car.
So that was the Yoo-hoo incident. So yeah,
that's great.
When you open something and it needs to be shaken,
you better make sure you keep a lid on
either
it.
Either it has to be sealed up or just let it go, man, because the time has passed. Theme music.
Theme music. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do.
Hello, dig for bone.
Hello and welcome to the Least Haunted Podcast, a place where science, skepticism, humor, and anthropology meet to discuss all things spooky, haunting, supernatural, and sometimes just the plain ridiculous. I'm your host, Cody Franks, and joining me as almost always is the lovable, laudable, loquacious lad, luminously lamenting ludicrous links of lofty, lengthy legends that lack learnedness and literacy. A lifelong listener and learner of localized lucubration. Laughing lightly while lollygagging and lounging languidly, lost in liminal lyrical lullation. Luscious, lovely lady lumps. 33. 33.
Garth.
Shout out.
What does loquacious mean?
Is it just talkable? Talking a lot? Kind of
Oh,
talkative?
yeah.
Loquacious? They're loquacious.
Yeah.
I'm really proud of the end there.
That was pretty great. Something about lady lumps.
So, first of all, shout out to on our Discord, Ken, By Barbarian and New Jared, they gave me kind of like a word bank and made some great suggestions for getting it started. And I just kind of rearranged things around. And I came up with one that was like 29 long.
That was a poem.
And I told Allison about it, my wife Allison, and she goes, if the word luscious isn't in there, then it's garbage. That's how she said it.
I'm glad that Allison was adamant that luscious be attached to me.
And so at the end, I was just like, okay, luscious, lovely lady lumps. Now, that doesn't really apply to you, but here's the genius of it. If I could stroke my ego.
Yeah. I'd like you to please, let's parse out this Garth's moniker a little before we move on.
This is the end there. Lost in liminal lyrical lelation.
What does lelation mean?
Lelation is a stage of childhood development in which children repeat words that they have heard because they're learning the sounds and learning words. But it's when they first start talking, they get to a point where they just repeat, like they parrot everything they've heard.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Okay, so that's repeating things that are nonsensical. And usually it's just because it feels good, not because it means anything.
Right.
Okay. Then you get, before that, but lost in liminal. Liminal is transitional.
Yeah,
right?
liminal spaces, yeah.
So you're lost in liminal lyrical repeating.
Right, yeah.
Luscious, lovely lady lumps, which is, you
can just imagine me as a little tiny boy saying, luscious, lovely lady lumps.
Because those are lyrics.
Yeah, my lumps, my lovely little
My
lumps.
Lovely lady lumps.
My lovely lady lumps.
And because that acts as the liminal point at the end of the introduction as we move into the rest. So it is literally, it's liminal lyrical lelation.
And here's an example of it. Yeah, that was pretty darn good, man. Yeah. That was pretty good.
I'm patting my own back, my own injured, fucked up back.
I'm patting your back from far away. We're separated by about 6 feet because of recording equipment.
And I'm still fucked up in the back and on medication.
Yeah, I'm going to pat your back really hard with my mind now, but I won't actually do it in real life. So, welcome to the show, everybody.
Yeah.
Before we move into the actual episode, it's always good to mention that we do have a Patreon. And so if you like us, you can support us at patreon.com/LeeTalented.
Yeah.
And there's stuff for you there. You hear us say it. That's my soft pitch.
Yeah, support us. And also, I'd like to take this moment real quick to do kind of like a call to action for our listeners. As you know, we don't really do a lot of the social media. We mean to. We start them, and then sometimes we just kind of let it fall.
Social media is exhausting, and no one knows. It's like there's so many medias to socialize on now.
It's a saturated market, and also it's a minefield of things that are problematic in place. Like you have to question the motivations of everybody who runs these things. It's a lot to keep up with, so we're kind of just keeping it to Discord. Occasionally I'll post maybe something on Threads, although I haven't in weeks.
We had a Tumblr going for a
in
little
Tumblr,
while too.
I do post things occasionally on Tumblr. Tumblr's one I want to dedicate more time to. But the call to action is this: because we don't use all these social medias, if you are on social media, dear listener, and you like what we do and you want to help us out, drop a link to our stuff, like wherever you are. Maybe you're in like a subreddit where there's something that kind of is germane to the topics.
Grassroots thing is very helpful.
Yeah, because also it feels really insincere if like I made a fake Reddit account and then I started going around.
That would be so sad.
Yeah, no, it's sad and it's just really frowned upon. And it's just I've been a Redditor for 14 years now, and you frown on that kind of shit. Unless it's art. Or like maybe you're trying to sell some kind of art or product.
I got banned from our art.
Oh, for posting your own stuff?
I posted my own stuff, but I think I put like a little watermark with and you're not supposed to do that, like with just like my website.
Yeah.
Anyway, I texted them back and I was like, I promise I won't do it again. Can you let me not be banned? And they said no.
And then
bastard moderators.
Yeah,
I was on the front page of our art once many years ago.
And your art was stolen from the Bernie Sanders subreddit and then showed up on one of those randomly generated t-shirt ads. Remember that?
No.
You don't remember that?
I don't remember that.
Oh.
Well, there was a time I did a drawing of Bernie Sanders being carried away by those cops.
Yeah. And you told people they could use it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But then, don't you remember? Because I was one of the mysterious Redditors who was watching who like tipped you off.
I don't remember.
They used to have those like spam bots that would show you like t-shirts. Oh, buy this shirt. You probably see them on other social media, right?
Yeah.
But usually it's almost like an AI thing where they're stealing people's artwork. Well, there was one that was your drawing that showed up, and it was like tied to some business. I was like, I know for a fact Garth isn't doing that.
Yeah.
And so I notified you. Did you ever follow up on that?
I don't remember any of this, so no, apparently not.
Okay.
But I actually was approached by the Colorado section of the Bernie campaign, and they asked if they could use
cool.
that drawing.
Yeah, on their shirt.
And they offered to pay me, and I was like, oh, take it for free. I like Bernie. So, yeah, and there was like, people were like wearing the shirts, like, it was pretty cool.
Remember we recorded that Bernie Sanders campaign song, and it showed up on their podcast.
That's right. Yeah. You were one of Birdie's little birds. Yeah. Anyway, welcome to Least on a Podcast. We're going to talk. We got to get to the topic. What's the topic?
Okay. So today's topic, speaking of Patreon, was a patron pick. This is a patron topic. Put a few up there from the choose from, and so the next 2 episodes were going to be originally both of these picks, but I think the next episode is actually going to be something spun off from this episode.
Oh, okay.
Because it's a lot.
Okay.
But the topic is Mount Shasta, Northern California.
This is the first time that a mountain has been a topic of an episode.
This is like the inverse of Tahoe.
Yeah, I was going to say we've done inverted mountains,
deep, but now we're going up.
Yeah.
Personal relationship. Garth, you have driven by Mount Shasta many times.
Oh yeah, well, having had friends in Oregon that I'd visit regularly, and then living in Oregon and coming back to California regularly to visit family and friends. I've driven past Mount Shasta dozens of times.
It's a big mountain.
It's really cool. It's one of the landmark things you go past on the way from the Silicon Valley to Central Oregon.
It's a national historic landmark.
Oh, that doesn't surprise me. It's really big. People are impressed by big things.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about how big in just a little bit here. When I know I drove by it when I was a kid on many road trips. Like I think I've mentioned before that my family drove to Alaska. We used to drive all over.
Oh, yeah.
So I know I saw it as a kid, but it might not have stuck with me. The first time as an adult that I drove by and I recognized how big it was.
Yeah.
With some friends and I were going to Lava Beds National Monument, which is northeast along the Oregon border from Mount Shasta. But when you approach it from the south on I-5, you're kind of like going through this like mountainous pass, right?
Yeah.
You're going through, and all of a sudden you come around a corner, and I thought I was looking at clouds. I'm like, whoa, look at those white clouds.
Because the top is always snow covered.
Yeah. Well, in the last couple of years it hasn't been as snow covered.
Yeah.
But this was like, again, this was probably 16, 17 years ago. And I remember like my friends and I were like, dude, look at those clouds. And then realized like, oh no, because you're looking like out through your windshield and then up into the distance. And like, oh no, that's the top of a fucking mountain.
Wow.
This is insane. Because, it's fucking insane. So to talk about it and how big and crazy and insane the whole thing is, we're going to have to split this into 3 parts in the episode.
Oh, okay. I'm going to have little tones for each section.
Okay.
Hold on just a second.
Okay. 3 parts.
Okay, so we got 3 parts.
And these 3 parts will be geological history, human history, and then mythology and paranormal stuff.
Right on.
Right?
That's
okay.
C, D, and E. I'll have to remember that. Okay, so starting off with
geological history. Okay. So, Mount Shasta is a stratovolcano, or actually a composite stratovolcano. Stratovolcanoes are like when the volcanoes, because there's different classifications, and so it's like when you have the really tall, steep ones that seem to end in a top where like your classical, you think of a volcano, like that big,
like really pyramid shaped, like a triangle,
pointy mountain with a crater at the top. That's a stratovolcano. Now, a composite stratovolcano is when you have a general stratovolcano, but it's made up of other volcanoes stacked on top of each other over like thousands and millions of years of them erupting. They just kind of build.
Oh, so it's like a many-topped volcano?
Yes.
Oh, well, those must be shaped like just jaggedly, like just
or they're like absorbed into it. And
okay.
Mount Shasta has 4 actual distinct peaks on it.
Okay.
That make up Mount Shasta as a whole.
Interesting.
But there's like 4 different peaks. One of them sometimes gets classified as a separate mountain, even though it is connected to it, and that's called Shastina. Like if you look at the profile of Mount Shasta, it's like there's definitely like the mountain, and then it kind of like has a little slope, and then it has another mountain that's on the
Yeah,
top.
this is that distinction where it's like, well, things are just shaped like some whatever in nature, but humans have got to categorize
Yeah.
it. So everybody's probably having huge debates as to whether this counts as part of Mount Shasta or is it its own thing.
So it's located in far northern California, near the bottom of the Cascade Range.
Oh yeah.
I think it's actually like the second volcano up. I think the true beginning of the Cascades is Mount Lassen.
Yeah, maybe so. I know Shasta. I always think of Shasta as kind of the bottom of the Cascades, but yeah,
there's
that
a little
could
transition period just south of that.
Yeah. My partner Kelly hiked the Pacific Crest Trail a couple of years ago, and she went from Mexico to Canada. And there's a point where you're going along the Sierra Mountain Range.
Yeah.
And then the whole idea is it's the crest trail, right? So it goes along the crest of the tectonic plates, basically, of North America and the Pacific plate. Anyway, you're going along the Sierras, and then you have to kind of like dip over and then hit the Cascades. So there's like sort of a movement toward the west.
There's a big valley, like a big
pretty
stretch,
much, and that's actually, you want to stay on the highest ridge line, and that's the best way to do it. So there's sort of a route that way, and then you go past Shasta and all that.
So like I said, made up of 4 separate cones that formed at separate times. At its tallest cone, the tallest peak, has an elevation of 14,179 feet, or that's 4,322 meters. And it has a prominence of 10,000 feet, or 2,979 meters.
A prominence.
I knew you were going to ask. Prominence is the height of a mountain if measured from the surrounding areas.
How do they
not sea level?
How do they determine what the surrounding area is?
Because it's kind of like a plateau. You have kind of there's like the base. So, Santa Cruz Mountains is pretty accurate because it pretty much starts at sea level. Like our mountain starts at sea level, right?
That's right. Yeah.
But the Sierras.
Oh, okay.
The Sierras have
But do they measure it from the Central Valley, or do they measure it from
elevations calculated from sea level? It's how many feet are you above sea level, right? So Mount Shasta, if you're at the top, you are 14,179 feet above sea level.
That's easy.
Sea level, right? But technically, the bottom of that mountain is the valley floor around it.
That's my question. So would the Sierras all be measured from the Central Valley? Yeah,
Central
Valley
on.
Okay.
I think, that would be the if you're measuring the prominence. Unless of course you're on the east side of the Sierra, which is the Great Basin, which starts at a higher elevation.
That's why I was asking. Like, how do they average out the area around?
I think that's why they usually just go by your sea level.
Sea level makes more sense for consistency.
But just to give it kind of an impressive stats, like if you were standing at the bottom, if you were in the town of Shasta, let's say, at the bottom of the mountain, and you're looking up 10,000 feet.
Wow.
Which is really fucking high.
Yes.
Like that's airplanes.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's where you start to really feel it.
Mm-hmm. So this actually makes Shasta the tallest mountain in the entire Cascade Range. Mount Rainier in Washington holds the crown for tallest, but is only 300 feet taller than Mount Shasta.
Oh, so whatever. I mean, that's,
And if you took Shastina, and if Shastina really was its own separate mountain, it would be the 4th tallest mountain in the Cascade Range.
Oh, wow.
But Shasta is still only the 5th tallest peak in California. California, simply the best. It's so
ask any state, they'll all tell you they love California.
If it's so tall that if there ever were to be a clear day in the Central Valley of California, that's a joke for the Californians.
The Californians.
One could see Mount Shasta from 146 miles or 235 kilometers to the south.
Wow.
I've actually been to a peak in the Sierras, this point called the Sierra Buttes, which the Pacific Crest Trail goes over. So Kelly has definitely gone over this mountain. And at the top of the Sierra Buttes, I think it's an elevation of 8,975 feet or something like that. And there's an old fire lookout tower at the top. So I hiked to the top of that.
Nice.
And on a clear day, which it happened to be, if you look like to your east, you were seeing like over the edge of the Sierras, and you basically see Nevada and the Great Basin. You look directly north, you can see Mount Lassen, which is about 100 miles away.
Wow.
And then if you just kind of like turn your head a little bit more to the west from Mount Lassen, you can see Shasta at the same time.
Wow.
Which is really
that's
insane.
quite a view. Yeah, that's amazing.
So what we know is Mount Shasta today is actually the remnants of 4 separate volcanic cones that have erupted and built up over time on top of each other. The earliest of these eruptions, or the earliest formation of Mount Shasta, occurred in the area of what is now the mountain's west side. So the west side of the mountain is the oldest. And that began forming about 593,000 years ago.
593,000.
It's like half a million years.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
This ancestral Mount Shasta grew to an unknown size. I don't know how big it is, but we do know that sometime between 300 and 360,000 years ago, this mountain partially collapsed.
Oh, okay.
There was a massive landslide on the northwest side of the mountain, very similar to what happened to Mount St. Helens in 1980, except the volume of the landslide off Mount St. Helens was only 0.67 cubic miles. This landslide was 6 cubic miles in material.
Wow, okay.
How big is that, I hear you ask? Which
hey,
brings
Cody,
us to a segment.
How big is that?
Well, imagine, if you will, Garth, the Great Pyramid of Giza.
Oh, I'm imagining it.
Now imagine 9,690 Great Pyramids of Giza.
Are they stacked on top of each? No. They're piled in a big bowl.
They're like all stacked in such a way so they interlock to make a giant cube.
Got
which
it.
You could potentially do with a bunch of
do that, yeah.
pyramids. Okay.
Wow, that's big.
Okay, now, I know that's kind of a pointless. That's the thing about measurements, right? I don't understand. So let's put it in another way that you might understand.
Yeah, keep going.
Okay. Picture your Toyota Prius.
Oh, yeah. It's right out there. I see it.
The volume of this landslide would be if you took 1,939,601,664 Toyota Priuses.
Oh, well, now it's in perspective.
Or thereabouts, and compressing them into a giant fucking cube. Thus, again, illustrating the pointlessness of trying to grasp really big numbers through random relative size comparisons.
You need to stagger. You need to be like, all right, imagine this many Priuses. How many pyramids is that? All right, how many? We need another interim large thing.
For the record, the current volume of Mount Shasta is estimated at 85 cubic miles, or 137,275 Great Pyramids of Giza.
Got it.
And that's assuming that the mountain isn't hollow. Foreshadowing.
Oh.
The next eruption in cone formed about 15 to 20,000 years ago. The third to form, and the second tallest, Shastina, was about sometime around 9,500 years ago is when that formed.
Okay.
And the last cone to form, which is the tallest peak at the top of, it's king of the mountain, top of the mountain, formed from an eruption about 8,000 years ago.
Oh, so it goes from shortest to tallest, kind of.
So, yeah,
the tallest is the most recent.
Yeah.
Okay.
This peak is called Hotlam Cone, and it has erupted several times in the last 8,000 years.
Oh, that's recent. That's pretty recent.
It used to be on the average of for most of that 8,000 years, it was on average about 800 years or so. On average, it would go every 100 years. But they said
every 800 years?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But for the last 4,000 years, or 3,000 years, it's about every 600 years. So it's getting shorter.
Oh, okay.
The last official eruption was around the year 1250 CE.
Oh, okay. What about unofficial eruptions?
Well, so there's disputes about this because there's a date as recent as the late 1700s being put forward on based on partially the accounts of a French explorer who reported seeing signs of a volcanic eruption, smoke and ash from the sea.
And that might have been Shasta, but who knows? And that might have just been it letting off a little bit of steam and not like a full-on eruption.
Yeah, well, here's the problem, though. His whole story is greatly disputed because it turns out the area where he saw this from was Point Mendocino.
You couldn't see it from Mendocino.
And it might be based on an actual misunderstanding that the local indigenous people in that area, inland from Point Mendocino, so it's coastal Miwok, they would actually do prescribed burns. So he might have been seeing them doing burns, and he was seeing smoke.
Oh, and he thought it was volcanic smoke. Oh, interesting. Okay. I didn't realize that the indigenous people did intentionally did burns.
Yeah.
Was that? Okay, we're going to get into a whole other topic.
Yeah,
I was just
I
have more questions.
Indigenous
about that.
people in California have always been viewed themselves and in their role. They've been stewards of the land. They really are. Their cultural thing was no, we take care of this land, and part of that was knowing that if you do more frequent small fires, it prevents giant brush and wildfires from happening.
Like the ones we've been experiencing.
Yeah, and
lately.
in doing so, you're also helping the forest because you're clearing out dead growth.
And a lot of trees actually need fires to reproduce.
Like giant sequoias do.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, along the coast of California, the indigenous peoples I went to a talk that was in Santa Cruz held by our friend Marisa in the Natural History Museum.
Oh, yeah.
And they hosted people from the local Ohlone tribe who did a whole thing about indigenous fire like burns and
that's
stuff.
fascinating. Yeah.
But so again, this date in the 1700s is disputed, although, but they do concede there actually might have been an eruption about 200 years ago because there's evidence of lahars, which are volcanic mudslides. So like when a volcano erupts that has snow on top of it. So Mount St. Helens, when that happened, it's like not only was there an issue of the giant fucking landslide, but then all the glaciers on top of the mountain also started to melt.
Yeah, naturally they're heating up.
Yeah, and so then you have all this volcanic ash and mud, and it's coming down the mountain. That's called a lahar.
Ah, okay.
And they can travel like hundreds of miles an hour. Similar to pyroclastic flows, which are giant explosions of hot gas that also can travel at 100 miles an hour.
Wow.
Going so fast that and so hot that like if it were to hit you, like for example, Pompeii.
Oh.
There were individuals in Pompeii who, when they got hit by the pyroclastic flow, their heads literally exploded because their brains insta-boiled.
Wow.
Yeah, so that can happen.
I thought everybody in Pompeii was just covered in ash, but some of them got covered in lava and their heads exploded.
Not lava, hot gas.
That gas made their heads
explode. Hot
explode.
gas and ash.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Scanners.
And so that evidence was like that might have happened around Shasta. So it could have been like a smaller eruption, not a massive, but enough to cause this mud flow and these explosive gases.
Okay.
There definitely were people living there when that happened at the time.
Oh, yeah.
Which brings us to the next portion, human history. The oldest evidence of human occupation around Mount Shasta date to about 9,000 years before the present, which would have been when one of those cones was forming. There were people. And the earliest archaeological sites of what they would say permanent settlement. So we have evidence that there are people in the area, maybe passing through.
Sure.
You know, you find artifacts, maybe some rock art and stuff. I know that there's rock art in the area of lava beds, which is just to the east of this. But then the actual like settlement where you say, no, this was a village. That's about 7,000 years before the present.
Okay.
And that would have been like directly on the mountainside. So we can say 7,000 years ago, there are people living on and around Mount Shasta. It was within the ancestral territory of several indigenous groups, including the Shasta, Okwanuchu,
okay.
Modoc, Okomawi, Atsugiwi, Karuk, Klamath, Wintu, and Yana tribes. The Yana tribe also will come up again later in this. But the Shasta, though, the first name, the Shasta people, isn't actually like a name that they would have called. So where does the name Shasta come from, right?
Yes, that was going to be something I was going to ask if you hadn't said.
So you would say like, oh, well, it must be named after this group of people. No. So the Shasta or Shastan peoples, it's actually a name given to a few groups who are all connected by a shared common language. It's actually a language group. They're the Shastan speakers. Although nowhere in any of those languages does the word Shasta appear.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is a name that was mistakenly applied by Europeans and itself is of such questionable and debatable origin that you will find people debating about it to this day, arguing and bringing up different examples. It may be that ultimately it's a corruption of the name of a different group from Oregon, or it's actually a corrupt version of a name of a local settler to the area. So a European settler came...
And somebody else started talking about them, and then the names got conflated.
Yeah. So the people themselves actually refer themselves as Kahasodi, or plain speakers, which is kind of funny because then they're known as by a name that is very not plain and hard to understand where it came from.
Yeah. And they're not. It's not like they're living on the plains.
Yeah.
They're on a mountainside. And
variations of the word Shasta have been used by whites for a long time, or Europeans for a long time. These include Chasta, Shasti, Sastel, Sasti, and Sasta. These all actually, like I said, might be derived from the name of a settler in the 1850s whose name was Susti or Sustika. And it might be that maybe. It's still debated. So where's the name come from? I don't know, but it's definitely not, or it's most likely not indigenous word. And if it is, it's not for the people who it's referring to.
Well, a lot of places up around that area and are named after native peoples or something like that. So yeah, I always assumed it was. So that's interesting.
Yeah, and as mentioned, these indigenous peoples have lived around Mount Shasta for thousands of years before the Europeans arrived.
Mm-hmm.
The first confirmed sighting by a European was in 1826, when it was seen by Peter Skene Ogden. He was a British-Canadian explorer and fur trapper, and eventually he was the head of the Hudson's Bay Company. You ever heard of the Hudson's Bay Company? Yeah, British-Canadian, like fur empire.
The fur, the fur emperors.
Pretty much. He, however, did not name the mountain. He actually named a nearby mountain, which is now known as McLaughlin Mountain, but he put it on his map as Mount Sasty. And then in 1841, they took that name from McLaughlin Mountain and moved it to the current Mount Shasta.
Oh, interesting.
To make it even more confusing.
I love all of the derivations of Shasta. They're all really funny.
So yeah, so it's a name that we don't know exactly where it came from, but then this guy heard it and then used it for a different mountain, and then later they moved it to this other mountain because there was a map error where then it got applied and eventually like, just, you know what? This is it now. Because that's what happens.
Yeah.
Other names for the mountain, in 1839, a map refers to it as Rogers Peak. And in 1828, Jedediah Smith sees Mount Shasta and he calls it Mount Simpson. Now, real quick.
What was the guy's name?
Jedediah Smith.
Oh.
And he named it Mount Simpson.
All right. So is this like a total coincidence?
Well,
for those of you who don't know what I'm going woo about, Jebediah Springfield founded Springfield in the show The Simpsons.
Yes.
So that's
and of course,
a lot
Matt
of stuff.
Groening grew up in Oregon,
He did.
and a lot of the character names and things in Springfield come from.
Yeah.
Is the town actually Springfield? It's
well, there is a town of Springfield in Oregon,
Yeah.
and he did confirm a few years ago that his idea was actually Springfield.
Yeah.
And actually, the geography of Springfield in
makes
the
sense.
show really works pretty well. There's Badlands on one side.
Yeah, they
of
go to the desert.
Springfield. Yeah,
They
it all adds up pretty well, actually.
They go to the mountains, they can ski, they have a beach.
Of course, traditionally, The Simpsons has always
Seemed East
not.
Coast.
Yeah, well, they've never said what state they're in on purpose as a joke, but it's kind of Oregon.
Anyway,
okay, yeah. Jedediah Smith named it Mount Simpson.
Mount Simpson.
Okay.
Yeah.
A noble spirit embiggens the smallest man.
In the 1820s, European settlers and explorers started utilizing the Siskiyou Trail. The Siskiyou Trail is actually an ancient migration and trade path that connected the peoples of the Upper Central Valley in California with the peoples of the Willamette Valley in northern Oregon.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
this is-
I've heard about a lot of these names are really familiar. The locals call it Willamette.
Yeah, and
But
that's-
Willamette, who knows?
yeah,
Whatever.
Siskiyou
Or
is that area.
Siskiyou. I've heard it
Yeah.
pronounced a few different ways. Yeah, interesting.
And actually, that was the Siskiyou Trail was then, or Siskiyou was then incorporated into what was called the California Trail as well, bringing people into California specifically during the Gold Rush of 1849, which increased the number of European settlers in the area and led to conflicts with the local indigenous peoples. So there actually was a thing where for a while the Klamath people were able to actually work out, like, there was no kind of it wasn't really a treaty, but they had like a deal with the U.S. government where they retained hunting and fishing and like basically rights to their ancestral home area.
Interesting.
So like nobody could tell them what to do. But then later,
We're talking mid 1800s here.
early
1800s maybe.
Mid to late 1800s. And then eventually in the 20th century, there's a bunch of fucked up shit where basically the government, like in the 1950s, they declassified a lot of tribes and said just straight up, you're not a tribe anymore. And this happened in like 1955.
We no longer recognize you, so now
Yeah.
we're going to do whatever we want.
Yeah,
with
and then
this.
they made that area into national forest land. And so, yeah, but then in, I think the late 80s, George Bush fucking gave it back to them or something. No, it was Nixon, I think, actually gave it back to him. There's some weird thing.
It's always so weird when
It's so weird.
A politician who's a villain did like one really cool thing.
Anyway, that's kind of getting a side thing. But
Yeah.
notable clashes in the area with indigenous people include the Modoc War of 1870 through 1872. This took place to the east of Mount Shasta, but you can see Shasta from there in the current day Lava Beds National Monument.
Oh, yeah.
The volcanic activity that made lava beds still very much tied to the activity of Mount Shasta. And then also, of course, I mentioned the Yana people who were part of their ancestral territory. There was another kind of subgroup off the Yana called the Yahi, and they lived between Mount Shasta and Mount Lassen, more closer to Lassen in the Oroville Redding area.
Oh, okay.
And that's where you might have heard of Ishi.
Ishi, yes.
Ishi was from the Yahi people who spoke a dialect of the Yana language, and of course his entire they were genocided. He was literally the last.
Yeah, all of the people, everybody he knew was dead, and he eventually just wandered down into, he figured he'd probably be killed, and there's a whole story. I won't get into it now, but Ishi's a fascinating tale.
Yeah, but Mount Shasta, so very important to indigenous mythology and cosmology, but we'll talk about that in section. No, we're not to that section yet.
Cody sees my finger hovering over the
we're
E
not
key.
We're not ready for the next section yet,
Okay.
but we will. Okay.
We're halfway there.
We're almost there.
We're between D and E, so here's D sharp. Okay.
In the 1850s, the first ascent of the mountain by Europeans occurred, namely by a guy, Elias Pierce. He was the first to get to the top. Since then, the mountain has remained a popular climbing and mountaineering destination, as well as a location for winter sports and skiing. The first ascent by a woman, or actually I should say by women, was made in 1856 by Harriet Eddy and Mary Campbell McLeod and their collected party, who went to the top of the mountain in 1856.
Cool.
John Muir spent some time on the mountain and actually had a story about getting trapped in a blizzard at the top of the mountain and only surviving because he crawled into a steaming hot spring at the top of the mountain.
John Muir.
John Wesley Powell, famously, he was like the first head of the U.S. Geological Service, and he was a Civil War veteran with one arm, and he rafted down the Colorado River, mapping the Colorado River
with one arm.
Yeah, and was and explored the Grand Canyon. He went and saw Shasta, including Bram Stoker, also wrote a book about Mount Shasta.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Of Dracula fame.
fame.
Yes. Wow.
In 1887, the Central Pacific Railroad completed a line connecting Oregon and California, and it passed by Mount Shasta, thus increasing the tourism to the area.
Is that the same as the Coast Star Line?
I think it is.
Okay. Yeah.
Which I've taken. I
have too. It's a nice one.
I've experienced sunrise on the backside of Mount Shasta. Really cool.
Beautiful.
Because it goes kind of to the back, doesn't it? Or does it go
front? I can't remember now.
I remember seeing it from an interesting angle. Either way. And then in the early 20th century, the first roads for automobiles followed the old Siskiyou Trail along the base of Mount Shasta. It used to be that you would have to take the coast road up Highway 1.
That's
along
a long
the coast, and
drive.
then cut over the Trinity Alps.
Right.
And then hit the Siskiyou Trail and take that up into Oregon. Now, today, the Siskiyou Trail exists as modern Interstate 5.
Right. Okay. Got it.
So when you're going to Oregon now for the Central Valley, you are on the old Siskiyou Trail, or more or less. In 1959, the record for most snowfall in a single snowstorm in the contiguous United States was recorded.
Contiguous?
Contiguous? Is it contiguous?
Contiguous. I think I've always heard it pronounced contiguous.
Okay, contiguous. United States was recorded at the Shasta Ski Bowl. It was 15 points, so 15 3/4 of a foot, or 480 centimeters, and it fell between February 13th and 15th. So in a 2-day period.
Quick. Yeah.
It was 16 feet of snow.
Wow.
And in 1976, the mountain was designated as a National Historic Landmark. And now we're going to take a quick break to dig for some bones before we get into the legends of paranormal conspiracy theories and indigenous stories of the mountain. But like I said, first we got to dig for bones. Do you like scary stories?
I sure do.
Do you have scary stories of your own?
Yeah.
Stuff you've written?
I can in short order, yeah. Just give me a few minutes.
Or something that actually happened to you?
Oh, maybe. I might, yeah.
You want to share it?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah.
Okay. You're perfect. Least Haunted Campfire Club, Season 4, on Least Haunted YouTube channel. Come here, original and maybe true ghost stories.
As long as it's a good story, who cares if it's true?
Good stories accompanied with footage of a fire or something similar.
All summer, every other week that we're
every
not
other
doing
week.
At Least Haunted show, we're going to have this for, a month or two. until we run out of stories. Send your stories.
Yeah, so if you have a story that you want to share, send it in to leasthauntedpodcast@gmail.com. It can either be just the text, and we can read it for you, or you can record yourself telling the story.
Even better.
Try to keep it 10, 15 minutes tops.
That's the sweet spot for attention.
And we'll see you there.
Are you a new parent trying to find your way?
Or are you thinking of becoming a new parent and want to know what to expect?
Or do you not plan on having kids but just want to know what it's like?
Nobody without kids wants to know what it's like.
I'm Travis.
I'm Stephanie.
And we have just the show for you.
You, Me, and Squee is a new podcast where we explore the challenges of being new parents and everything we learn along the way. We'll talk about our experiences, different parenting philosophies and trends, giving our own perspectives, and talking about what worked for us and what didn't.
Let's face it, a lot has changed since our parents and grandparents were raising kids. So we're all kind of figuring out this new frontier for ourselves, and it can feel pretty lonely. So come join us for the journey where sometimes we'll laugh, sometimes we'll cry, but we'll always be real with you.
You, Me, and Squee. It beats listening to your childless aunt give her 2 cents.
Or any of your aunts, really.
Okay.
Welcome back. Those were some bones, weren't they?
Bones.
They sure were.
All right, well, now we're going to get to section 3. Legends and stories and paranormal junk. So,
okay.
According to the Klamath people, Mount Shasta is the dwelling place of Skell, the spirit of the above world. So Skell, who is also kind of like the Sky Father, made Mount Shasta as both a dwelling place to live inside, but also he was in the sky and he couldn't come down to the earth, and so he started piling stuff up below him to make a mound that he could then walk down to the earth.
It's sort of like an inverse Tower of Babel.
Yeah. And then he creates he creates grizzly bears first before people, and then later his daughter, who just exists and is living with him inside the mountain. So basically the idea was when you see puffs of smoke coming out of the mountain, that's his fire.
Oh,
nice. Inside the dwelling. Yeah. She goes out, and then she ends up getting captured by grizzlies. Oh, he goes and hides in there because he's afraid of the grizzly bears.
I like that the Sky God is afraid of grizzly bears.
He made them too powerful. And at this point, see, they could use weapons. They could talk. They were
the bears?
Yeah, they're more like werebears.
They were big, scary Ewoks.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah. Werebears.
Werebears. And she gets captured, but then she ends up falling in love with one of these grizzlies, and they bear children. And those children are humans.
Whoa.
And then Sky Daddy, he gets mad at the bear. Well, basically, her mother-in-law, her bear mother-in-law is like, hey, we better tell her dad what's going on.
This actually brings me, I was wondering what these gods looked like. And so you got a bear on one side, the god on the other, that makes a human.
Yeah.
So that gives you some idea of what the god might look like. Something, whatever you could combine with a bear, and then a human comes out of it. So the god is like a lizard.
So yeah, they tell him what's up and give him back his daughter, or say, and we have your daughter, and also you're a granddaddy. And but he's all pissed at the bears. He's like, you know what? I'm tired of being scared of you. You guys are too fucking crafty, and you deceived me. And so now you must walk on all fours, and you can't speak anymore. And that's how you get grizzlies as being the dangerous animals that they are. Now he has an opponent who is Lao, spirit of the world below. He's the spirit of the sky. That was the spirit of below. And Lao inhabits Mount Mazama to the north of Mount Shasta. Now, most people know Mount Mazama by a different name. Pop quiz, Garth. What's the more common name for Mount Mazama?
Mount Rainier, maybe?
No.
Mount.
Think about this. Lord of the Underworld.
Mount. Well, the underworld was Neptune. There's no Mount Neptune.
Okay.
Mount Devil. Oh, Mount Diablo.
Nope. That's south.
Yeah, no, that
no. And I know so the idea is that they were fighting each other, throwing rocks and lava at each other. From these
so
two
this
places.
would be something nearby. I do not know my geography.
I know that you've been there. Crater Lake.
Oh, of course.
Because Crater Lake,
of course,
thousands of years ago, was a full-on mountain that also collapsed
Yeah,
in on itself.
it didn't blow its top. It collapsed in on itself.
It imploded.
Right.
And or just
oh,
collapsed.
that's a good story.
And so it became Crater Lake. So naturally, in their cosmology, if the mountain going up is how the sky god gets here, the big hole full of water that goes down that occasionally throws fire and shit out, that must be where the god of the
That
underworld
actually
is.
makes more sense because I was thinking, well, why would the underworld god also live in a mountain? It's like, oh no, it's
No,
a
so
mountain
the official
with a
name
valley.
for Crater Lake is Crater Lake is what is the lake that exists inside of Mount Mazama.
Now, I always heard when I visited Crater Lake, and this could be apocryphal or not true, that the indigenous peoples of the area didn't look at the lake, that it was like taboo. And I have no idea whether that's true. That sounds like if maybe some did, but I have a hard time believing that's true because it's really pretty.
If the super powerful spiritual opponent to your god, or I don't want to say these. I don't want to say evil and good because again,
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
We're applying European ideas.
Yeah.
They might not have seen it that way.
No.
And people lived there for a very long time, so societies change. Maybe at some point they were looking at it that way and not at others. But
I'm bringing it more as just this illustration that has a connection to like the world around them, and we've got another mountain that has a very similar past to Shasta, but it's like no, it fell in on itself. I don't know how many Great Pyramids of Giza that was.
It's quite a few.
Yeah.
It's a big crater.
So Mount Shasta though has a powerful attraction to other religious groups as well. Okay. There's a Zen Buddhist monastery founded in 1971 by Roshi Hawan G.U. Kennett. G.U. Kennett, born Peggy Teresa Nancy Kennett, was a British Roshi. Roshi is your Zen masters.
Oh, okay.
Most famous for having been the first female to be sanctioned by the Soto School of Japan, which is like a Zen Buddhist thing, to teach in the West.
Wow.
So good for her.
Yeah,
and
that's
she
really
made
interesting.
a temple, or found a monastery.
Is that still around?
I believe so.
Cool.
In the early 1900s, the area received a large Catholic Italian population coming with the railroad. And there's still a sizable Catholic population and presence in the area as well.
Interesting.
And so they've kind of incorporated the mountain into it's a sign of God's grandeur.
Sure.
But what most people are aware of is Mount Shasta's connection to several New Age religions and religious movements, and its place in UFOlogy and paranormal circles. This is where the shoe drops, Garth. And,
I can tell from your tone of voice.
and that's where this mountain falls into our purview. That's when it becomes our problem. Because as we're going to find out, some of it is complete bullshit. Well, a lot of it's complete bullshit, actually.
This might indeed be the least haunted mountain.
And some of it is downright offensive and racist.
Oh.
So buckle up and check the straps of your safety harnesses because we are about to climb up and then descend into some incredible peaks of false history.
Oh, okay.
And also descend deep into the rabbit hole of conspiracy.
All right. Yes. Let's go.
Garth. Have you ever heard of Lemuria?
Lemuria?
Lemuria.
No.
In 1854, British zoologist Philip Sclater, it's spelt weird.
Sclater.
But he's British, so maybe it's Sclater. I'm going to call him Sclater.
Okay.
Like A.C. Slater. There we go. No. So 1854, British zoologist Philip Sclater was troubled by a paleontological mystery. Why were there lemurs in Madagascar and lemur fossils in the Indian subcontinent, but no signs of lemurs in Africa?
Because Africa is between India and...
No, Madagascar is to the east. Madagascar is like the Indian Ocean.
Oh, I would... Okay, yeah. Cut all that.
So... this was before plate tectonic theory, so Sclater came up with a hypothesis. Because the actual answer is that Madagascar moved with plate tectonics and continental drift.
Okay, yeah,
right?
that would make sense. Yeah.
But his solution, because there's no plate tectonic theory, this is the 1850s, is that there must have been a continent in the Indian Ocean that connected Madagascar to India.
An ancient land bridge.
And that this continent must have sunk Atlantis style. He called this theoretical continent Lemuria. Get it? Lemurs. After lemurs.
I love the idea that there's a whole continent named after lemurs. Lemuria.
In fact, the there's a coat of arms for the British area that, because a lot of this is all colonialism, right?
Right.
There's an area that was like the British group that was responsible for that area of the ocean. Like I think it connected like the Seychelles and a few other little islands in the Indian Ocean. On their seal is like a Latin motto that translates that we are the guardians of the lemurs. We're the guardians of Lemuria. Yeah. And it's actually directly because of the idea that those are actually the tips of mountains on a sunken continent.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Which is not true.
Ah.
But the idea of Lemuria became very popular at the end of the 19th century, and then it was catapulted even higher into the consciousness of spiritualism and theosophy by a returning figure on Least Haunted. Listeners, let's give a cold diarrhea welcome to Madame Blavatsky.
Madame Blavatsky, I remember you.
And like she was just in a recent episode. We talked about her very recently. I think it's Stone
Yeah,
Tape
what was
Theory?
her deal last week? When last we saw her, what was she up to?
It might have been Stone Tape.
Oh, yeah, that was like a couple episodes ago.
Yeah.
Was she doing spirit photography?
No.
Oh, okay. Never mind. I was thinking
But she came up
somebody else.
because the Harry Price was like, hey, this lady's full of shit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
But that, even though she was exposed to being full of shit, it doesn't stop people from still like doing all of her shit, her bullshit.
Right.
Hence the cold diarrhea.
Right.
But when she's
Isn't that weird that that's worse than hot diarrhea?
right, it's because it's like
Somebody's been saving it. All right. So
when she's building her cult/religion, she includes Lemuria into the whole cosmology of the thing, claiming that Lemurians were the ancient source for modern humans entirely.
Oh, okay.
So that's like where we evolved
So
from, came from.
Oh, okay. So rather than
Africa,
it's
because we can't come
just next to Africa.
We can't come from the same place those black people came from.
Yeah,
we must have come from a separate place entirely. Yeah,
maybe. I mean, I guess. Yeah,
racism.
I don't. Yeah, maybe.
It's the same reason why they were like when they were trying to. The first ideas that Africa was the cradle of humanity came about. There were hoaxes trying to. This hoax called the Piltdown Man, which is trying to show that no, humans evolved in England. They're Europeans.
I have a feeling when people were trying to figure out where humans came from, everybody said they came from their backyard. Yeah.
In short, Lemuria can be compared to the story of Atlantis, but it's like in the Indian Ocean or later a Pacific Ocean variant.
Okay.
Because even though the original idea placed Lemuria in the Indian Ocean between Madagascar and India, it was later transported in retellings and came to be pictured as once being in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
That's a big continent.
We're getting closer to Shasta.
Was it still called Lemuria, even though it was the Pacific Ocean? Okay.
According to Blavatsky, Theosophists, and even modern Lemurian religious groups, because yes, they still exist, the Lemurians were an incredibly advanced civilization. Lemuria has also been called the continent of Mu. Mu was theorized as a submerged continent in the Pacific Ocean by British-American archaeologist, air quotes heavily implied, Augustus Le Plongeon. Plongeon. He's French.
Plongeon.
No, he's British.
Plongeon.
Anyway, Plongeon was interested in pre-Columbian ruins in the Americas, particularly those of Central America, especially the Maya.
Oh, yeah.
And in racist fashion, he believed that these brown people could not have built these pyramids and that the ruins were evidence of an ancient advanced civilization that must have arrived in the area from somewhere else. Standard Atlantis shit.
This is a very common thing where European explorers find all these amazing old things all over the world, and they're like, well, the people who live here now, they couldn't have done it. It must have been okay, we've seen this before.
And we talked about it in our indigenous shapeshifters with Josh about how the Atlantis myth is used to prop up a lot of racist fucking shit.
Okay.
And it is, we're going to find out.
Here's another example.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to get even deeper into that cold shit.
That is one big pile of shit.
He then comes up with the idea of a continent called Mu. M-U. Mu?
M-U? Yeah, that's a Greek letter,
Mu, right?
I believe.
Which he actually argued was the same as Atlantis, except it wasn't in the Atlantic, but rather in the Pacific.
Our Pacific Atlantis.
Okay, so I get really confused between Mu and Lemuria, whether or not they're the same or they're different, because different sources claim different things.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's still there's still things that get labeled as part of Mu, like off the southern coast of the southernmost Japanese island, there is this geological formation underwater that is very angular.
Oh, okay.
And there's arguments from pseudoscientists that this is actually a man-made structure.
Oh.
So it would have to have been made when the water level was low enough for it to be constructed. This would have placed it like, early on in the last glacial maximum. It would have been like, this thing is really old.
During an ice age, I
Yeah,
suppose.
during an ice age.
Right, okay.
And then some argue actually this is like a temple left over from the continent of Mu.
Pretty close to Asia.
Yeah.
If it's over there.
Pelagian's ideas were later expounded on by British occultist James Churchward. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
James Churchward. Churchward. Oh, man, we have fun here. In a series of books, beginning with The Lost Continent of Mu, The Motherland of Man, which was 1926, and then he re-edited it later as The Lost Continent of Mu in 1931, and other popular books in the series are The Children of Mu and The Sacred Symbols of Mu. And if you think we're drifting away from Mount Shasta, we actually aren't. We're drifting closer, too. Much like how plate tectonics can cause continents to drift.
I can see it, Cody, on the horizon. Mount Shasta.
Speaking of plate tectonic theory, although seen as a crackpot theory itself when it was first introduced, it would eventually be vindicated as scientific fact.
The guy that invented plate tectonic theory, was laughed.
Yeah.
I think he died without anyone taking him seriously, and it was only
destroyed
later.
His career.
Yeah, only later did everyone realize, he was onto something.
Yeah. So he vindicated. And in doing so, it also removed any possibility for the supposed lost continents of Lemuria and or Mu, or even the supposed combined Lemuria-Mu continent.
The Lemuria-Muse.
Lemuria. But as I said, there are still Lemurian believers today, and most of them situated around Mount Shasta. But why?
Yeah, that's inland.
Okay, so in the 1880s, a young man named Frederick Spencer Oliver, says 1886, we'll say he's in his 20s. And he has this incident that happens where suddenly he was living around Mount Shasta, and the story is that he has a seizure or a stroke or goes into a comatose state, and then when he comes out of it, his hand is gestating wildly as if writing, and he gets a pen and it starts doing automatic writing.
Oh yeah.
And then eventually he has visions and he starts channeling a spirit calling itself Philos the Thebetan. Thebetan. Yeah.
Okay.
Thibetan. Almost like Tibetan, but with a lisp. Thebetan.
T-H-E.
T-H-I.
That's all for now, kids. B-I. Okay. Yeah,
anyway,
continue.
and this happened over a period of 3 years. So I guess it first struck him in 1883, and then he's finished by 1886.
Okay.
And in doing so, he writes an entire book, which is a biography of this Philos of the Thebetan, who explains his entire life on the island of Atlantis.
Okay.
And so it mostly pertains itself with Atlantean culture and so forth, and then talks about their crazy technological and scientific advancements and what they're capable of. And then it also kind of briefly ties into Lemuria because the Atlanteans and Lemurians are connected, it turns out.
Even though North America's in the way.
Yeah.
Okay.
They have crazy inventions like anti-gravity, and it talks about reincarnation. In fact, Philos can reincarnate, and that's how he's able to move forward through time and share this information.
Wiggle people's hands.
Yeah. One of these incarnations in the book was as a gold prospector on Mount Shasta.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And supposedly he tunneled in and found an ancient city inside the mountain with a temple. And then this miner slash Philos transcends and is now still to this day resides inside the temple inside the mountain.
Wow.
And at least that's how this book ends. I tried reading the book. You can find it. It's called A Dweller on Two Planets. It's actually published posthumously after he died by his mother. It was never published in his life.
Oh, okay.
And in it, it's fucking batshit crazy. I mean, the first half, I just skipped ahead to where the Shasta stuff wants to start because I'm okay, I want to kind of keep it connected to what we're talking about.
Sure.
I don't need to know about the whole Atlantis backstory. I just want to get to the thing. And then it's just you get to it and it is almost incomprehensible. It is just half sentences and half thoughts, kind of like I'm doing right now.
Do you have like a little quote? I want to hear a little bit of this. Where did this guy Oliver live? Was he on the East Coast?
No, around Mount Shasta.
Oh, he was. Okay, so this would have been in his backyard. Yeah. Got it. Okay.
I can't find the exact passage because now I'm finding things that are a little more comprehensible. But sometimes it's like when you read quotes from Trump, where it's like he starts with and then he starts talking about something else.
Yeah.
I was thinking like that.
Okay, gotcha.
But there are other things where then it kind of is basically it can be viewed as like a science fiction novel. Is how I would view it.
Okay.
Unfortunately, other people viewed it as actual fact.
It's the only time really that's ever happened.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Oh, here we go. So, some gets kind of poetic. Mm-hmm. Traveling southward, mine are no more. The youth bends his course. A year agone, the golden phantoms died. The mind caved in, and no man knows that sepulchre. In the wilds of Siskiyou, winter wet had extinguished the flames and laid the smoky sea. But the succeeding summer saw all aglow again, matched by the lightnings of heaven. Our traveler is at the very base of Aika Butte, and he and his steed crawl along the slopes and valleys in the bed of the fire-born ocean of smoke, as do crustacea at the bottom of the aqueous sea.
I can totally imagine Trump saying all that in a speech.
A flaw of wind decreases the denseness of the clouds, and above his head he sees an indistinct shape lit feebly by the smoke-smothered moon. Yeah, it's just okay.
Yes, it's a nice, actually. I like it.
But yeah, it's a very interesting
poetic
prose. Yeah, poetic prose. After that book comes out, it gets very popular. People are talking about this, and then we get this guy, Harvey Spencer Lewis.
Harvey Spencer Lewis.
Harvey Spencer Lewis was the founder of the and the first imperator of the U.S. branch of the ancient and mystical order Rosicrucians.
Oh, the Rosicrucians.
The Rosicrucians.
Ah,
yes.
All right.
So he's the guy that starts the American branch of that. And Rosicrucianism is going to deserve its own episode because
I don't know a lot about them. There is a Rosicrucian museum nearby where we live.
Well, their headquarters, they're based out of San Jose. Like that is the global headquarters of this like branch.
Yeah. Pretty
but they're actually just one, like, it's almost like when you say Rosicrucianists, it's like saying, kind of like saying Christian, like, okay, well, what denomination?
Oh, I see. So that makes a difference.
Yeah, it's like it's a movement that was started back in like the 1600s.
Oh, wow.
And then branches off into a bunch of different little groups. And so you have this one. And the head of that is Harvey Spencer Lewis. So he publishes a book in 1931 called Lemuria, The Lost Continent of the Pacific. So he writes under a pseudonym, which is Wishart S. Curvey or Survey.
Curvy.
And I guess he writes a lot of his stuff under this pseudonym.
Wishart S. Curvy.
So, real quick, I got to stop because this book is still under copyright by the ancient order Rosicrucians, and they are kind of litigious.
Oh.
And so I need to quickly say that under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research.
Okay.
All rights of the original work remain with the original copyright holders, and no infringement is intended. And I think what we're doing here definitely falls under that purview. So I'm going to, because there are going to be a few little...
You're going to be quoting this thing.
Here's some quotes.
Okay.
So with that out of the way, let's talk about the intro to this book. And this is a quote. We have just stated that our desire has been to make this book free from ponderous scientific quotations, and for any to take advantage of this by criticizing the lack of such evidence will be a sign of insincerity. If the self-evident and indisputable facts to be found in this book are given proper consideration, there can be no doubt left in the mind of any critic that most of the entire story of Lemuria, as recorded herein, must be true.
Most of it.
Yeah, so the whole...
these are self-evident facts.
So the whole introduction of this book is framed where this guy
is very defensive.
Where he's saying, like, look, I'm going to tell you a bunch of shit, but I'm going to do it in a way that doesn't actually quote facts or give citations.
Who needs facts and citations?
Because
it's so obvious.
Right. Well, it makes
it's ponderous. It's boring.
Yeah, exactly. It's boring, right? He also says that, and this comes up in the text many times. So for the record, I read this entire book.
Yeah, you read this entire book
over a 24-hour period. It's only 150 something pages.
Oh, you're a good reader. All for this episode. That's
Yeah.
so, yeah.
And it really worried Allison because I would turn around and I would say things out of context, like, can you believe blah, 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 blah. And she said, do you ever worry that, like, this is pushing space out of your brain for, like, useful things? And yes, but also, like I said about the other book, I just, which I didn't read the whole thing of, I just, like, view it as reading a sci-fi novel, kind of.
Yeah.
One that just really pisses you off.
So were you just like angry the whole time you read this entire book over the course of 24 hours?
Because he keeps talking about how, like, everything that throughout the text, like I was saying, he brings up that there's supposedly actual historical records that he has seen, like writings from Lemuria that he has either in his possession or has had in his possession in the past. And so that's where he's getting all this stuff. And I kept having to say, like, if you have this evidence, fucking present it.
Right,
just like these
right.
goddamn UFO hearings that are happening right now. If you have the evidence, show it. Otherwise, you're just a crazy person.
Yeah.
And also going back to that, the Dweller on Two Worlds book, because it became the basis for a lot of these New Age religions, still use that as a text. And this book that I'm about to talk, the Rosicrucianists, the reason they maintain a copyright is because they still publish it and sell it.
We could probably get it at the gift shop at the Rosicrucian Museum.
And I'd like to real quick say, side note, any religious movement that copyrights their holy texts is a fucking scam. Because if
it
you
sounds
really want,
antithetical to...
if you want your voice and message to get out there and proselytize, you make that freely available. Anyway, that's a side thing.
Is this where I'm going to start a timer?
Yeah, so Garth, here's what we're going to do.
We discussed this before starting. I think it's a great idea. All right, go ahead and tell them.
Because I read this book, and there's a lot to get through.
Okay.
Like, it is batshit crazy. I'm going to give you, like...
Cody's coming in hot here.
I'm going to give you, like, this quick rundown history
Okay.
of Lemuria. And then, and then we'll kind of go from there. But, and then I'm going to give you some more quotes at the end.
Oh, okay.
Which is fun. But, I want 5 minutes on the clock.
All right, so I'm going to start a timer here.
And I need to get my first
Okay,
timer.
you tell me, or actually, how am I going to know when to press go?
When I exhale this,
When you exhale...
when I'm done checking
All right,
these
so
notes.
check those notes. Get yourself centered. And I will press go. All right, Cody is centering himself. He's going to speak about this dispassionately. All right, here we go.
5 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. So, once upon a time, there was this giant continent called Lemuria that was kind of, I guess what we'd say, is now present day Indian Ocean moving to the Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
Now, even though there's no real continental drift theory, it still somehow drifts. He actually puts forth something kind of like continental drift theory in the book.
Oh.
Where he's like, it's possible that some of them are floating. He also explains that there have been a lot of continents that have existed and ceased to exist. Maybe they cease to exist because there actually might be hollow pockets in the earth that open up, or full of gas pockets that open up, and then they fucking sink and they get swallowed up. So even if you could go to the bottom of the ocean, Garth, you're not going to find evidence of these things because it was swallowed by the earth, you see.
Oh, okay.
Now, Lemuria actually was made by God. Like, God is real in this cosmology.
Okay.
Like, God.
Okay.
He's the one consciousness. And he creates Lemuria, and that's actually where the Garden of Eden is. And he creates Lemurians. We didn't evolve from anything. Or they didn't evolve from anything. Sorry, I'm jumping the gun. They didn't evolve from anything. Lemurians were created as these perfect beings by God. Spoiler, jumping ahead, we evolved from Lemurians. They are the ancient humans. So humans entered this world perfect beings and have over time degenerated into our myriad of messy races. Okay, so Lemurians, hundreds of thousands of years, they're living on this continent. Over time, they develop psychic abilities because they become so in tune with nature and they have such a communion with God that they are able to, they develop let me describe them to you. Sorry, get ahead.
No, it's great.
Okay, so average male Lemurian is about, average height to people today, but they can max out at 7 feet tall.
Mm-hmm.
They have larger heads than we do now, with larger foreheads, sometimes about 7 inches of forehead. Now, just above their eyes, in the middle of their forehead, they don't have an extra eye, but they do have this weird fleshy organ about the size of a walnut. Also, their hair naturally grows in a mullet.
Yeah.
They got somewhat like just really strong, somewhat longer limbs. So they're big, lanky dudes with giant foreheads. The women a little bit shorter and lighter skinned. The men have tanner skin because there's a bunch of sexism mixed in about the place of women being indoors doing women work. They're telepathic. They can communicate over long distances and even over time. They're able to eventually use this extrasensory organ in their sixth sense to know that there's a cataclysm that is coming to Lemuria. At some point, it is going to sink beneath the waves. So, in preparation, they start sending out colonies around the world.
It's very Superman.
Also, according to the story, no mountains exist until about 30,000 years ago.
Oh, okay.
So there's a lot of places where they wouldn't go because they were low-lying swamps. Other places they went to would eventually become valleys. The bottom of the Gulf of Mexico, apparently there was a big Lemurian settlement there, but it flooded when water levels rose. Atlantis is a colony of Lemurians.
Oh, okay. Got it.
They made Atlantis, which also sinks beneath the waves. And then Atlantis sends out a bunch of colonies. It's claimed that 25,000 years ago, the Lemurians founded the Egyptian culture 25,000 years ago. Now keep that in mind because the Rosicrucianists today have the Rosicrucian Museum in San Jose, which is the largest collection of Egyptian artifacts in the West.
That's right.
And it's by people who believe that they actually started 25,000 years ago and were founded by these beings from another continent.
Oh.
So, think about that.
Okay. You're at 4 minutes out of 5.
Oh, God damn it. Maybe it needs to be longer. Oh, shit. God damn it. Okay. So,
you know what? I'm going to give you an extra minute.
Okay.
6 minutes.
They get incredibly advanced. They have magic stones that they find, some kind of mineral that's hydrophobic. And so they are able to propel themselves in boats by having this stone they lower into the water and it pushes the water away.
Oh, yeah.
Pushes the boat away from that. So they keep, but the island starts to sink, or the continent starts to sink, but it starts sinking in the west first. And as that sinks, it actually raises up the eastern coast.
Oh, yeah.
And kind of pushes it. And so it's getting pushed into what is North America. Garth,
Florida?
what if I told you, no, we live on Lemuria. California, Oregon, and Washington, and the Baja California Peninsula are what's left of Lemuria.
Oh, yeah, I love it. I believe it.
That's why Shasta has Lemurians in it. Because
that was like the edge.
They started building cities and places to hide in mountains and stone places because they knew those are the places that would last and be safe.
That's true.
And as the west part rose up into these tall mountains like the Sierra and the Cascade Range, that was their last holdout.
Wow. I love it.
So that was what, 5 minutes?
5 minutes, 18 seconds.
Okay.
Well done. Well done. Round of applause.
Lemurians, so now we're going to extra innings at this thing.
Okay.
That was
I'm not going to
that was just a cramming thing.
I'm not going to time you anymore.
There's whole chapters that are talking about the culture of the Lemurians, cultural practices, and again, he says, from the records of Lemuria that we have. Also, they also claim that some of these records came from a mysterious Asian person who arrived at their offices and gave them a bundle of ancient sacred texts that have been taken from Tibetan monasteries as well. So the story of Lemuria is like pieced together from various ancient texts and first-hand accounts because he talks about reading inscriptions on Lemurian ruins. And it's like, okay, again, if you have these ruins, you got to tell me where they are, bro, because
they're somewhere in Mount Shasta, Cody. We got to go find them.
But there's just fucking racist. There's so much racism. Okay. So the question starts off also that's like he goes in this whole spiral about indigenous Americans and a bunch of shit that's just flat out fucking lies. He claims that all indigenous tribes share certain words and they have in common, even though nothing else is the same. And these words happen to be indistinguishable. In fact, they are the exact same words as Hebrew. And so they are the lost tribe of Israel. But they're also Lemurians.
This is not the only group to think that Native Americans were Jewish. Yeah.
But then he comes to this whole idea that, like, well, maybe the indigenous people on the West Coast arrived from Lemuria, and the ones on the East Coast came from Atlantis, or Israel via Atlantis, because maybe the Hebrews are also some kind of ancient Lemurian thing. Okay. I don't know. The point is they bring up things that are, like, contradictory too in the same paragraph. They'll talk about, for example, that humans who live in tropical zones are by nature lazy and less developed because their brains are too hot from the tropics.
Too hot a brain.
But
yeah.
the continent of Lemuria was very tropical.
Yeah, so wait a minute. That would mean maybe their foreheads were used as cooling. Like elephant ears,
I think the idea was
Cody.
that their brains are in there so big. They also were menaced by dinosaurs. They've been around since the time of dinosaurs.
Okay.
And they were menaced by dinosaurs, but that's kind of what pushed their evolution to make them smart, is they had to outsmart dinosaurs.
To
and other
outsmart the
beasts.
dinosaurs.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Maybe as a bone, maybe as a deleted bone or as a thing, I can tell you the entire Lemurian marriage ceremony too, which I told Allison, and she was just like, that's what she's like, what the fuck? Like, is this pushing things out of your brain? Are you going to forget important things? He also says, so other evidence for why they must be Lemurians is that there's also, like, why is it that cultures around the world have certain similar cultural practices and things they do?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it's like, so he's actually touching on something.
Like some Joseph Campbell-y, like...
There actually is anthropological explanations for, like, if you take people and put them in similar situations with similar problems, with similar materials, they are going to find similar solutions.
Yeah, that develop independently of one another.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Independent cultural evolution. This is the thing.
Mm-hmm.
But for him, this is evidence that there had to have been some kind of superior race that seeded these ideas in places.
I see.
Now, he does, though, point to certain indigenous California groups as being like pure Lemurians, or as close as you can get. So I'm going to...
Yeah, I can't think of any one I've seen that look like the Lemurians you described.
Check out the racism on this one.
Okay.
You know, fucking set phasers to angry or whatever.
Okay.
I don't know. Or set faces to stunned.
Oh, that's
Here we
cute.
go. So, quote,
Okay. Stunned.
these people, known technically as a tribe with the name Chumash. He's talking about people in Santa Barbara Islands. The Santa Barbara Islands.
Chumash.
So Santa Barbara Islands are also a place where there were Lemurians hiding in there, because that's also the peaks of... I mean, actually, the Santa Barbara and the Channel Islands were actually a larger island during the Ice Age. That's true. And then as they got isolated, they became these, like, some were just peaks of mountains that were on this island.
Right.
Island didn't really necessarily... Is it sinking if the water level rises, but you don't actually go down?
I don't think so, but that's a really fun question.
Right? Okay.
Distance from the center of the Earth is the ultimate determiner of sinkingness.
What's the prominence of these islands?
Yeah, but what is your relative? Yeah. Okay.
So he looks at the Chumash around the Channel Islands. He's like, no, them. Okay, so again, the Chumash, quote, constituted practically an independent race of people, so far as their ancestry would appear in ordinary records of anthropology. But as the reader will divine, they were one of a number of groups of tribes of separated communities that were direct descendants of the Lemurians, continuing to live in their own land without intermarrying with other tribes or allowing the blood that flowed in their veins to be blended with any other.
Oh, pure blood.
And then goes on, science admits that these people were well-versed and well-developed in the art of sea life, and technically expert in harpooning and spear throwing.
Oh, okay.
Now, if you don't know why I said it that way...
Well, there's the
there's a racial epithet.
The racial epithet. See
We're
the
not going to
movie
say what it
Bowfinger.
is.
Did you hear what he's doing? Oh yeah. I know he's doing something. I just can't put my finger on it. Yeah. What's he doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, about throwing spears and
usually applied to a different group, but just also
usually referencing Africans, I believe.
Yeah, but usually put it as like a thing of like an inferior group, you know.
Right.
So yeah, it's kind of where he goes from this whole thing about them being like, oh no, they're the leftovers of the Lemurians, so they're like really special. But also, don't ever forget, they are still spear throwers.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I wouldn't have actually read it that way, but I see where you're going with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now, stories about Lemurians in Mount Shasta. That's that book.
Okay.
That book is still in publication and under copyright, and it was also really influential. In fact, in the book, he makes references to Plongeon, the guy who first came up with the idea of Mu, too.
Okay.
Because he's convinced that the Mayans were also just straight up Lemurians, and also that the Mayan, the temples of the Maya are actually hundreds of thousands of years old.
Hundreds of thousands.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
He also pointed at the argument made about Easter Island is also a sign of Lemurians.
Oh, okay.
Because here's the thing: is like the moai, the statues, they're made out of volcanic rock, but the little hats they wear are actually sandstone. And there's no sandstone on that island.
They wear hats?
There's little.
I thought they just had long. heads.
No, they have little there's little cylindrical hats that they wear. Some were toppled off,
and
but
it's a
they've
different
restored.
kind of a stone.
And he claimed, oh, it was sandstone. There's no sandstone on that island, which is true that there's no sandstone. But also, it's not true that the hats are made out of. The hats are actually made out of tufa, which is compressed volcanic ash.
Oh.
And so, yeah. So, get out of here with your shitty geology. Let's talk about the Lemurians at Mount Shasta now.
Okay, let's do it, Cody.
Okay.
All right.
So, there's all kinds of fucking crazy stories about hikers encountering strange individuals while on the mountain who fit the description of tall...
with soft organs in their foreheads.
They don't have the soft organs anymore.
Oh, okay.
They have jewels.
Oh, cool.
Possibly obscuring to hide the soft walnut-sized organ. They have
if you
decorative headdresses. With
if you had a soft thing right in the middle of your forehead, you'd want to cover it up.
He did say, though, that some of the Lemurians also degenerated in their own time and became almost like blind cave fish, where they because they used that third eye to see.
Well, they were stuck in Mount Shasta all the time. Of course, they lost their
these
sight.
are like before that even happened. He said they were they kept their eyes closed and used the third eye to see because they lived in like dense forests. This one group of them.
They had LiDAR in the third eye.
Yeah, and then this third eye also let them see through time, so they could see the true. Like it was like
they could see where they were going to end up.
It was almost like a Zen eye.
Somewhere.
Zen eye was like they'd see a mountain, but they could see the true mountain. They could see the real mountain. They just saw what it was.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, they also lost the ability to speak, and because they communicated telepathically solely. But those ones were seen as somewhat like degenerate from the other Lemurians. So even in this perfect race, you've got racism.
In this made-up race.
Yeah. There's stories that supposedly they would come down off the mountain and go into local towns and buy supplies they needed. And pay in gold nuggets.
Oh.
Now I have to wonder. He says that they stockpiled everything they need, and they actually had advanced technology that could basically replicate anything they need. So why do they need to come out of the mountain to buy supplies?
Well, maybe they couldn't replicate everything.
I don't know. There's also descriptions of from like the 20th century about people seeing nightly fires on the mountain and seeing shadows of shapes of people dancing and chanting around fires.
Oh, yeah.
But when you try to get close, you're repelled by a force field that
Oh.
either... If it doesn't physically pick you up and turn you around and point the other way, it like implants the suggestion in your mind that you really don't want to be here. You just want to leave.
I believe. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
There's also claim that they found an obelisk in one of these places that had Lemurian writing on it, as well as writing in English. And
Latin. Like a Rosetta Stone.
Yeah, that like basically it was said there's like it's the site for the celebration to celebrate or worship basically North America as their savior. For like, oh, we came to rest on this shore and now like that's what keeps us alive. And so they have to do these like nightly rituals. Then there's this story from early 1900s. This guy, Edgar Lucian Larkin, who was the director of the Mount Lowe Observatory in Southern California.
Oh,
now, this is true. There is an observatory, and he really was the director.
Yeah.
But the story was that he was testing out a new telescope, and he pointed it at Mount Shasta.
From where?
From the Mount Lowe Observatory, which is by Los Angeles.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
The curve of the Earth is too much. I don't think you could...
Well, with that, he didn't see the base of the mountain, but he could see up the side of the mountain. And he claims... that he saw golden domes and marble structures and buildings.
From L.A.
Yeah, and then at night, strange lights would emanate out, but they weren't like fire. It wasn't like fire, and it wasn't like electrical. It was like a plasma light, I guess, what we would describe it now.
Yeah, even though Shasta is very, very tall, I don't know that you could see it from L.A. even on the clearest of days.
Even in the 1930s when there was no pollution.
Right, because I think... that's so far away that the curve of the Earth would fall behind.
Yeah, we said you
that,
could see it from 146 miles away, but that's like 300, 400 miles away.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Yeah, no. But then here's the thing: is it turns out there's like no evidence this really happened. There's no news. It's all fucking apocryphal. People bring this story up about the golden dome seen by this guy, but he was.
But you can get a lot closer to Shasta, and if you can't see the golden domes from closer, why would you be able to see them from LA? It's weird.
Although he actually was somewhat of an occultist.
Oh, okay.
So he really did like have some occult like believings, but there's no actual hard evidence this event ever happened where he made this claim about the golden domes.
Oh, okay.
But to this day, people still talk about like maybe it's cloaked. Like sometimes you see the golden domes.
Yeah.
And then other times the Lemurians hide it with some kind of cloaking device.
Yeah. Okay, that would make sense. So he saw him when the cloaking device wasn't functioning
They didn't
correctly.
expect because he was so far away.
Oh,
but
there you
that
go.
also ignores the fact that there were people living in towns around Mount Shasta at the time who
Maybe you have to be a certain distance away for the cloak to not work.
Maybe, yeah, a special lens.
Special lenses.
Okay. Then there's the legend of J.C. Brown. Now, according to a legend, J.C. Brown, he's a British prospector. And he's working, he's been hired by the Lord Cowdrey Mining Company of England to prospect Mount Shasta for gold deposits.
Mm-hmm.
This is in 1904.
Oh, okay.
Which is just kind of weird because it's like, why would a British company be able to get mining rights on a mountain that probably already has all the mining rights claimed?
It sounds like he's snuck up in there.
Anyway, yeah. So he's looking
in dead of night. A miner arrives at Mount
Shasta. And in doing
Shasta.
so, he finds a cave. And this cave leads him to an underground village, like the ruins of an underground village, filled with gold shields, like giant gold shields, and mummies. Some of these mummies up to 10 feet tall.
Whoa.
Giants. You'll find also this ties into, the Lemurians tie into also the story of ancient giants in the American West.
Oh, okay.
We talked briefly about it before. And they might be hoaxes about, there's this, like, for some reason it just won't go away, this idea that there are giants, and specifically giant mummies, all around the American West hidden in caves. And then he, like, keeps it a secret because he doesn't want the mining, if he talks about it, then the mining company would get the rights to it because he's under contract. So so he keeps his mouth shut for 30 years. And then he tells it to this other guy, and they named John Root, who proceeds to gather an exploration team in Stockton, California, of about 80 people. They're like, okay, we're going to go, because he's like, I can kind of remember where it's at, but I can't remember exactly. So we're going to need a group to look, but it's there. So 80 people join up. They go up there.
That's a big
Well, they plan the
people.
day to leave, and he's supposed to be their guide, and he never shows up, and he's never heard from again.
Ooh.
But here's another thing. Again, no evidence this story ever really happened.
How is this story specifically related to the Rosicrucians, or is this a separate thing?
This is after we've moved on from the Rosicrucians.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if that was part of that lore or not.
No.
This is just a different Shasta story. Got it. Okay.
But it might have been So, but it gets brought up all the time when because people still talk about the Lemurians.
Yeah.
In Mount Shasta, so this is brought up like in a lot of these conspiracy videos and stuff about it. It'll bring like, well, what about this case? This happened, and then why did he disappear? Well, one might say like, if this truly did happen and he disappeared, it's probably because he was full of shit, trying to get some kind of scam, got what he wanted, and fucking scarpered off.
He probably made all 80 people give him some money for the expedition, and then supplies. As soon as he got it, for supplies, and then he got out of there.
Or, this is just fucking completely made up.
Yeah, maybe he didn't exist at all, and it's just a story.
Yeah, exactly. Or the other idea is that maybe he actually was abducted by the Lemurians. He was going to lead him right to
that was my first thought.
Yeah, right.
I was like, no, they got to him.
So then we're going to go through a few other things real quick that are tied to it, and we'll get I want to briefly mention the I Am movement, or the I Am Action movement. It's a religious group, and it has to be its own episode.
I am.
Yeah, taken from Genesis, the name of God. I am. He is the one that is called I am. Remember in Dogma, I am.
He is the one who is called I. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so the short of it, though, real quick, a religious cult derived from Theosophy, so again, Blavatsky.
Mm-hmm.
It arose in the 1930s, in which features an encounter with a spiritual being while hiking on Mount Shasta as part of the basis for the religion. And it eventually involves the Supreme Court and supernatural copyright law. So it's got to be its own episode.
That's going to be illegally haunted.
Yeah. And then UFOs. So this is from, again, I'm going to cite something from Lemuria, the Lost Continent of the Pacific, that Rosicrucian book. Quote, "There are hundreds of others who have testified to having seen peculiarly shaped boats, which have flown out of this region high in the air over the hills and valleys of California, and have been seen by others to come onto the waters of the Pacific Ocean at the shore and then to continue out on the seas as a vessel. Similar boats have been seen by seamen on the high seas, and others have seen these boats rise again in the air and go upon the land of some of the islands of the Pacific. Others have seen these peculiar vessels as far north as the Aleutian Islands. Only recently, a group of persons playing golf on one of the golf lawns of California near the foothills of the Sierra Nevada range saw a peculiar silver-like vessel rise in the air and float over the mountaintops and disappear. It was unlike any airship that has ever been seen, and there was absolutely no noise emanating from it to indicate that it was moved by a motor of any kind.
Unidentified floating objects.
What does this sound like?
UFOs.
Now, this is from a book written in 1931. The UFO craze wouldn't be until the 1940s.
Ooh, interesting.
Right?
Proto UFO.
Yeah. Protofo.
Protofo.
So, yeah, alien stuff. And ufology and Mount Shasta, ideas about maybe there's an alien base inside the mountain. So again, the mountain's hollow. There's some kind of ancient city in there that's Lemurian or alien, or maybe in some places you might get conflated and say maybe the Lemurians are aliens.
Sure, why not? They sound like them from your description.
As I think came up in the recent UFO hearings, the idea is that maybe what we think are aliens aren't aliens at all. Maybe they're an ancient advanced race from Earth, like Lemurians. So it just keeps coming back.
Yeah.
It may not be called the same thing, but it's the same
It's
fucking
all
idea.
the same parts with new names.
Yeah, exactly.
Why won't these ideas die, Cody?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Bad ideas never die. They just get recycled.
Right.
Cold diarrhea. Now, also, I want to mention there's, I think it might come up in your thing, lenticular clouds. Are you going to talk about
I'm just going to talk about what they are briefly, how they're formed.
Yeah, because Mount Shasta...
They are confused with UFOs because they look spooky and they're kind of
Mount Shasta
circular.
is known for, it generates a lot of lenticular clouds, which might be cover for the UFOs to land.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's this thing called the Missing 411. Or Missing 411. I don't know how you say it. I think it's Missing 411. This shows up a lot. It's a whole, and it has to also be its own episode because it's an iceberg of insanity revolving around people going missing under strange circumstances and a massive conspiracy and cover up by government and national park officials.
Yeah.
Spoilers. It's actually about Bigfoot.
Oh.
Who has also been seen on Mount Shasta.
Of course Bigfoot's on Mount Shasta. Of course.
Bigfoot also deserves its own long-coming episode.
People have been wondering why we have a podcast about paranormal things and we haven't done Bigfoot yet. He's coming, guys.
Yeah, I think we figured it out today.
We did. We figured out. We won't tell you now, but he's coming.
He's coming. The Squatch is coming.
The Squatch will be here.
But that's also why the Missing 411 thing comes up, because Missing 411 actually involves Bigfoot.
The missing 4 minutes 11 seconds of incriminating tape showing where Bigfoot comes from.
Yeah. But the idea is that some people go missing on Shasta and maybe they're killed by Bigfoot. I don't know. And there's also dwarf and gnome sightings on the mountain.
Oh well, sure.
According to stories on the internet.
Yeah.
Wait, hold on. I gotta do. According to stories on the internet, some people hiking around the mountain have witnessed small gnome-like beings hiding amongst rocks and boulders on certain parts of the mountain.
Oh, okay.
Also, real quick, they still see the Lemurians, the weird Lemurians, but they say that they seem to jump into the air or teleport away. So there's more crazy shit there. Also, alien robots. Also, according to stories on the internet, there may be evil robot doppelgangers on the mountain. This is also connected to the Missing 411 because that comes up in one of the Missing 411 stories about an alien robot grandma.
I think we've invented a new trope where every time you talk about stories on the internet, we have to have that sound.
Stories on the internet.
So that was a missing robot grandma doppelganger.
Anyway.
Okay, got it. Cool.
And that's about as far as we are going to go this time.
We haven't hiked to the top of Shasta yet, but we're a little ways up here.
Mount Shasta, this is, I just mentioned a bunch of things that need their own episode.
Right.
That still revolve around Shasta. So Shasta's going to come back. This isn't the end. But Mount Shasta continues to be a popular spot for many New Age religious movements and conspiracy theorists. And lest we forget, it is an important and sacred mountain for the Klamath peoples and several other indigenous groups in the area. Personally, I find these New Age religions and movements that co-opt and rewrite the history of Mount Shasta and take it away from the indigenous peoples of the area incredibly offensive. especially because it's based on fucking weird racist theories. And
I mean, there's a lot wrapped up in there. A lot of these stories are pretty hilarious and fun. And yeah, I don't know. It depends on how you look at it. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I see where you're coming from, though.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, because the Lemurian story in particular is based on scientifically provable false ideas about the world,
Right?
Alternate history, racism, and I suspect a very financially lucrative market for such fairy tales.
Well, they did copyright it.
Mm-hmm. But that does not mean the mountain is not sacred. Like we said about its role in local cosmology, but also in the way that any piece of this natural earth is sacred by the very virtue that it's part of the story of the earth and the life on it and the continuity of life and time.
It's a pretty breathtaking mountain. I mean,
yeah.
I'm gonna get to see it on Monday.
Nice.
Yeah, because we're all heading north for a trip, so I'm going right past Mount Shasta.
It's a geological record of this planet's tumultuous and awesome power, as well as a record of humanity in the context of the North American continent. It is not, however, in any way a part of the story of the origin of humanity on some non-existent ancient continent, or its origins as mullet-sporting giants with huge heads and warty third eyes in the middle of their giant six heads. That's a six head. That's when a forehead is so big that it ceases to be a forehead. It's like a six head. Maybe sometimes even a seven head, a full Vegeta. And to quote Forrest Gump, that's all I have to say about that.
All right.
Garth's Corner?
Garth's Corner. Time for Garth's Corner. That was great. Wow. Yeah. Okay. Here we go. We're doing this pretty quick to a release date, so I've got a live Garth's Corner. Well, let's see how well I can do it. Shasta, Shasta, I want to Mount Shasta. Oh, who on earth wouldn't? It's a great big mountain with a storied past. At least that's how I've understood it. So here's a Garth's Corner about not that. It's a list of things named Shasta, except for this cat named Shasto. Also, we're going to talk about clouds. Clouds. So here we are in Garth's Corner. This is a very short Garth's Corner. I'm going to just list off other things named Shasta. There was a soft drink named Shasta. There was
Shasta Cola.
Yeah, Shasta Cola. Procter & Gamble had a shampoo named Shasta in the 1940s and 50s. Doesn't exist anymore. It was a cream shampoo.
Cream.
The Shasta Travel Trailers is an American brand of trailer built between 1941 and 2004. Shasta of Narnia is the main character in The Horse and the Boy, 1954, the C.S. Lewis. Shasta is the 11th track on the singer-songwriter Vienna Tang's album Warm Strangers. Shasta Beast is the 12th track on the Eagles of Death metal release, Death by Sexy, 2006. Shasta Faye Hepworth, major character of Paul Thomas Anderson's film Inherent Vice, was based on Thomas Pynchon's novel, also Inherent Vice. So there's a character named Shasta. Shasta Mcnasty, a television sitcom on UPN.
Shasta Mcnasty! I told our people on Discord that there would be a reference. Shasta Mcnasty.
the name was shortened to Shasta before the season 1 ended.
And it only had one season. It was on UPN.
So they changed the name in the middle of the only season.
Because people were like, what's this McNasty show?
I would think that'd be the hook. Or maybe that's why they didn't have a second season.
For one glorious season in 1999 on the UPN network.
Shasta of the Wolves was a 1919 feral child novel. Its title character by Olaf Baker. Shasta, a Siberian Husky, was a Siberian Husky in Snow Buddies, which is a movie, I guess. Now we're going to talk about those clouds.
Lenticular clouds.
It's Garth's lenticular cloud corner. Corner within a corner. When moist, stable air flows over a large eddy, such as caused by Mount Shasta, or some other mountain, but in this case, Mount Shasta, there are a series of large-scale standing waves that form on the leeward side of the mountain. Now, there's two sides of a mountain. There's upwind and downwind. Those are the windward side and the leeward side.
The lee of the stone.
Yeah, exactly. So those are two sides of the mountain. toward the direction from which the wind is coming is up is windward, and leeward is downwind from the point of reference along the direction toward which the wind is going. So if the temperature at the crest of that wave drops below the dew point, you get a cloud. Under certain conditions, long strings of lenticular clouds may form near the crest of each successive wave and create the formation known as a wave cloud. There are wave systems that can produce large updrafts, occasionally enough for water vapor to condense and produce precipitation. Lenticular clouds have been said to be mistaken for UFOs, mainly because many of them have the shape
sky pancakes.
They're really pretty. They're very ominous, but they're cool, and they look like they were sculpted. They don't look like a normal fluffy abstract cloud. They really have a shape to them.
Well, that's the thing, is we're so used to clouds having like shapes that are so vague that you can just imagine
Yeah,
things.
it's like oh, cloud formations, looking at clouds. But no, these have a shape to them. And lenticular clouds generally do not form over low-lying or flat terrain, so many people have never seen one beforehand and don't know they can exist. They have bright colors called iridescence, sometimes have been seen along the edge of lenticular clouds. This Garth's Corner owes a thanks to Wikipedia and to the Cloud Appreciation Society. The society founded by Gavin Preter-Penny from the UK in January 2005. The society aims to foster understanding and appreciation of clouds and has over 50,000 members from 120 countries as of March 2020. So that was the Cloud Appreciation Society.
I've seen a lenticular cloud on Lake Tahoe. Actually, it was north of Lake Tahoe, but I was on the lake.
I think I have too, and I didn't know that's what it was called, but they are pretty cool.
Yeah. So they happen a lot over Shasta, and people say, "Hey, look, UFOs."
Yep.
Or the aliens make that so that we don't see their UFO going down, but
it's still shaped like the UFO.
It's a pretty fucking conspicuous thing.
I like the idea that the aliens have all this great technology, and they're like, "All right, we're gonna hide our UFO in a cloud," and it's totally the same shape as the UFO.
We can make a building invisible.
Yeah,
we can make a city invisible. And force fields that turn people around and force them away. But our flying ships...
aliens hide in the clouds. Did you ever see Nope?
I have not.
It's pretty good.
I gotta watch it.
All right, guys. That does do it for the Least Haunted podcast. Not forever. We'll be back. For this episode. We should probably do
episode,
Oh, yeah.
It's probably going to be something mentioned in this one because I've already read so much and all this shit.
Yeah, I'll be out of town for a little while, so we're going to double up and record another episode in a few days.
Although I think if it was going off the polls and the runner-up in the polls, I believe was going to be illegally haunted, but I think we'll wait on that.
Well, we have to get Travis Alexander
Yeah. It's going to be
on
about,
board for that.
Is it legal to murder a ghost?
I mean,
I don't,
is it moral is the real question. Cool.
Our patron producers, our Monster Squadron producers, we had a hangout this last week. People who are in the Monster Squadron, if you forgot... You're listening. Let me remind you.
Oh yeah, you get on Discord and we do a little video hangout with us and fans.
Yeah, if you go into your little releases on Patreon for you exclusively, Monster Squadron, you'll have an invite to the Monster Squadron hangout room on our Discord server, and that's where we do our about monthly hangouts on video. So last time, we just hung out for a couple hours on video and just chatted and talked about some really interesting shit. Some of you missed a inside joke that will never be explained, except for the people who were there that night will know about Butt Cheek Charlie. And now, if you fucking missed out,
I was late to the hangout, so I didn't even know.
You don't know about Butt Cheek Charlie.
No, I don't.
So
I never will.
If you don't want to miss out on things like Butt Cheek
Don't
Charlie
miss out like Garth.
or his brother Butt Crack Jack, you better come and join the Discord server, Monster Squadron. Or join the Monster Squadron so you can join the Discord server. And our Monster Squadron patron producers are Travis Alexander, the Bi Barbarian, Rachel Krieger, Tom Dahl, Justin Duckham, Kelly Flynn, Gunnar Franks, Carla Harrington, Lord Havelock, New Jared, Brian Lamb, Alicia Overton, TJ Levenhagen, Alicia Overton, and Jordan Ramey, Blue Roan.
That's it. Thank you, all of you, for being your continued support and patronage.
Yeah.
Using that money, we just ordered some new shirts. In fact, I have them. So this will give you an idea of how handmade this podcast is. I have right here all of the pressings. No, the shirt, we still need to make them.
I know, but the pressings came.
Yeah, they did.
I gotta get you some money then.
I've got them right here.
Wow. And do we still have the still?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
No, it's
cool.
we got it all set.
All right, so we're gonna have these shirts available, and I think I'm ordering some stickers.
We have a few more shirts we need to give to a couple Monster Squadron people who we haven't sent them yet.
So everybody who was just mentioned the Monster Squadron, if you haven't gotten it yet, I'm sorry, but we're having another round. You'll get yours soon. Let me know. I think I know who you are.
But we're also going to have a limited batch of shirts just kicking around, so we're hopefully going to start selling them on our website this holiday season in a few months.
But the people who are on that list, you guys get a shirt. But anybody joining up now, Monster Squadron, I'm sorry, you're not going to get a shirt for joining Monster Squadron, but you can get a discount on a shirt.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, because like I said, we're ordering some other merch, and I think I'd like to have a store set up, within a couple months. We'll have an actual
I think that seems doable.
Yeah, and so you'll be able to get stuff and support us that way. Again, also, you can send us things. Reminder, you can send to P.O. Box 22, Redwood Estates, California, 95044. Haunted items, or, I think it'd be cool if somebody sent fan art, just fan letters.
Fan art?
I'm a fan of the mail, the postal service in the mail. I like getting something in the mail.
It is fun to get a thing in the mail.
Yeah, it's exciting. And let's see what else. Campfire Club, I think, has about 2 episodes left to go.
Yep. We're rolling along with the Campfire Club. There will be another one coming out a week from the day this episode drops. Yep. It's every other Friday.
Yeah. And what else? Anything else going on?
That's all the things at the moment.
Cool. Well, with all that business out of the way,
got to end a podcast with business.
Yeah, I know, right? Pod business.
Yeah, that's all the stuff. All of the things about the day.
All right, so until next time, remember, the only thing that's haunted
is you.
What is Shasta Mcnasty?
¿Qué pasa? No! Hey!
What? It's the show everyone will be talking about this fall. Because there's something about Shasta Mcnasty.
Luke, I'm your father.
They're the monkeys of the new millennium.
It's evil, but I like it.
Cindy Margolis stars in the premiere.
Damn! Oh my!
Shasta Mcnasty is coming at you Tuesdays this fall on UPN.
The Least Haunted podcast is recorded before a dead studio audience and is a presentation of Sequoia Productions, LLC.